What's up, y'all, and welcome back to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts, my life, my way. So, on this self discovery or self journey, right? And this is the series that we're in case you haven't picked up on it. We're going to be talking to all things, about finding yourself and rediscovering yourself and rediscovering yourself, like they said in the pink. We're going to talk about all of those things, but it wouldn't be right if I didn't talk about maybe some of the moments where I didn't feel like myself, or maybe even still to this day that I don't feel like myself in some areas of my life. And I know some of you are probably thinking, like, how old are you? And like, when do you feel like you get to know yourself? And I think it's a lifelong journey, honestly. And I think that at different phases of my life, I've discovered some things that were new. And then I discovered that some things were different and had changed and evolved. And I think that's the beauty in growing older. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is being uncomfortable in my gayness. And this conversation was sparked from just questions about why I never talk about certain issues in the gay space or in the LGBTQIA space. And oftentimes people think that even though I have a small platform, in my opinion, but people feel like you should be galvanizing it and using it to talk about just social issues and things like that, which in some form I do. But when it comes to the gay life being a part of my identity, I feel completely adequate in what that experience is like. And I know some of you are like, how do you feel that way? Like you're gay or you're not gay? So I think we have to look at it in different ways. So most people, when they think of gay, they just think of two men that want to be with each other, two women that want to think of each other, that want to be with each other, or they just think of everybody that is not straight and they put them into that bucket. But there is a difference between just same sex attraction in the many ways that that can happen, and in gay culture. And so engaging in the practice of being with another man, yes, I know what that is like. But gay culture is something that is still relatively new for me. I shouldn't say that it's new. It is something that I have not tapped into. And so let's just talk about it. One of the first things that I think separates me from a lot of my peers and a lot of people that I've just come in contact with in my experience is that I didn't know early on that I had that level of attraction. And so there are people that are like, well, how didn't you know? How did you know? You don't know until you know. So I always explain to people that I would have been considered bi attracted growing up because I saw women as beautiful. I had a baby with one. And we were together for years, like a number of years. And so and it's not just one. Let me not say I've been around. I've lived. And so my coming into men was like at the end of my relationship with my last girl. And honestly, it was just a fluke of some sort. I had a friend that was like, yo, like, I'm feeling you. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you cool too. And he was like, no, like, I'm feeling you, feeling you. Now, this was a friend that I had just been cool with. We both from the Midwest. He's Chicago, I'm Indiana. So, I mean, we just talked about like girl stuff, like with our girls and stuff like that. And he had went through a breakup not long before I had. So we kind of like was in that space, but I guess he just was like, I'm gonna shoot my shot in my particular area where I lived in Indiana, very rural, very small town. I didn't see gay people, right? So I didn't, and if they were gay, I didn't know. You know what I mean? Like there were some older gentlemen that were a little bit different, but we just thought that they were different and a little bit crazy. To be honest, we just like, okay, the one with the colorful suits and stuff like that, and just walking with the pimp daddy cane. Like we just thought that they were like a little throwed off or whatever. But later find out that some of them were gay and stuff like that. So I didn't grow up with the lens of knowing what gay looked like, felt like, what that interaction was. And the internet, wasn't around at that particular time, or should I say it was probably newer. It was probably newer as I was coming up. And so when you don't have that level of exposure and you don't see that represented, as a person who's bi attracted, you continue, for me, I just continued doing what I knew how to do. Like I had girls interested in me and I was like, okay, cool. And, it was what it was. And so I just really didn't know. I get people who, when I say that, women, but men too, that are like, but how didn't you know? Like you could tell if you looked at a dude, you would be able to tell like if you got hard or you got da da da. Da. And I'm like, every person that you look at that's attractive, you've gotten hard, even if that's somebody that you would smash or be, you know what I mean, be with in that way. Like you wasn't just sitting there on hard, wet and ready, right? So like, let's be for real for a second. Like, let's not hyper sexualize, gayness or whatever. Like we just automatically ready. Like, yeah, you look at people and be like, they're attractive. But to me, I would look at women and be like, she's beautiful. And I would look at men and be like, he's a beautiful dude too. I never really was the type to be like salivating at the lips for anybody. So it just wasn't like I don't operate in that dynamic. And I think for people who do, that's okay. Like I'm not automatically like, oh, I want to suck his piece when I see somebody sexy. Like that is the last thing that honestly comes to my mind. If I think about it, I'm like, is it clean? And let me do my visual. Why is it leaning? And why is it leaking? So there's so many things in my mind that happen before I would even think about doing something like that. Like for real, where has it been? You know what I mean? So I just don't think in that way. And I think sometimes people will, on both sides, right, will automatically apply that logic, but it's illogical for me anyway. And so, yes, I was able to see attraction in men and women, but I didn't see it as like I wanted to smash or be with it. Like I just didn't have like that wasn't the first thing that came to my mind. And so in trying to explain that to other people, it really is this, for me, this realization that I just think differently than most people anyway. And so the ideas that most people have about the way I would move around the world is greatly and vastly different from how I actually move through the world. Like some people see me and they think that I'm just this social butterfly and that I love to be in the mix. And that couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. I actually prefer to like, I don't want to say I want to blend in, but I prefer to walk into a room and just do my own thing. I don't expect or want people to just come over to me. It's just something that happens. And so I get the perception. And then I've dated, of course, I've dated, and I'm very vocal at this point about dating. So I guess that level of openness would have people thinking that I'm just very universal, but I'm not. I just sometimes there are moments where I don't mind sharing my life experiences with people, and that's just what I do. So, but I also feel like there's like this nerd deep down inside of me who very much would, if I could, I would be in my house all the time and I would never leave. Like if I could make all the money that I could make from my house, I would probably never leave if I'm being very honest with you, just because the world is so different outside than I imagine it to be in my head. And I feel like I'm constantly reminded that I think differently or that I feel differently than most people. And it creates this kind of division in me because on one hand like I'm pro people and I want everybody to be great, and if there's any way that I can help educate people, help inform people, like I'm more than happy to do that because it allows me a sense of fulfillment. But on the other hand, I am reminded that I think so much differently than most people that I almost feel like I'm on an island anyway, and so in my mind I might as well just stay at home. But honestly, if I could trust that everybody would pick my groceries the way I would, that shopping is easier online or whatever, but sometimes I want to touch it. If I could live in my own world and in my own bubble, I would. And I think most people don't know that about me or don't think that would be something that I would want. But honestly, it would just be easier. But I don't view the world the way everybody else does. So that's just hopefully I explained that. I don't know if I explained that well enough, but hopefully I explained that well enough. And then, so you take all of that that already is me. I'm like this nerd for real. I want to take stuff apart. Like, I remember my grandmother being like, "You're going to be an electrician because you just keep taking things apart, the TV, the radio, like the washer and dryer." Like, I literally, if there was something wrong with something in the house, I'd literally take it apart. For refrigerator, like, I would literally take it apart, figure it out, and put it back together, because the wonderment of my mind truly is how things work. And when they stop working, it's like, how do I fix it? And so I find myself, when I'm out in the world, I'm looking around and I'm like, how does that work? Or I go into businesses because I have a very business mindset. I'm analyzing the overhead expenses. I'm analyzing what it took to create the structure and the design. My brain just won't stop. Like, that's just how it works. And so, even to extend that level of wonderment into people, I often wonder how people think the way that they do. And for me, I had to learn how people regulate their emotions differently, because to me there's a logical response to everything, but when you add in emotions and feelings, it kind of seems illogical, but it makes sense in a way. Early on, I couldn't understand the differentiation between that. And as an adult, I had to grow to understand those feelings, because I was like, I don't understand these feelings that people have. I don't understand why you're drawn to somebody who it seems like doesn't like you. I don't understand why you would want to go back to somebody. Like, I couldn't understand that at first, because it just never was who I was. Like, if you showed that you liked me, I liked you, we were good. If you moved away from me, I was like, okay, cool. And it wasn't until much later as an adult I started trying to figure out like how emotions and feelings and environments and like all of that stuff plays into it. So thinking differently really was, I feel like it's my superpower, but I also feel like it is like the thorn in my side, because I feel like I'm misunderstood a lot of the times, and I feel like a lot of people will just assign something they see out there in the world onto me based on like what they feel or what they perceive me as, or just one attribute, which is another thing, just in general. But like, when you come into gay culture and gay lifestyle, I didn't know anything about that other than like, this guy told me he was attracted to me. I'm actually not turned off by it, but I'm curious, because that's how my mind works. I'm curious to see like, what would that look like for me? Like, if that's just how my brain, I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, just have some conversations. So I had to get out of the small town that I was in, and I had to just kind of go and figure out in the largest city next to me, which was Indianapolis. I had to go and figure it out there. And when I started meeting people there, at first, I started on the chat lines. I started on like Black Planet, Urban Chat. And I know people are probably like, that is not safe. It's not always, it wasn't always safe. But what I would say is like, we used the tools that we had. You know what I mean? Google wasn't even a thing. We had Ask Jeeves. And so, I mean, this was like MySpace era. iPhones, if they were even out, they were like brand new, and only the rich kids had them. So the tools and the information just wasn't there. I couldn't just Google something on the internet. Like, right, we had AOL dial up at the time, and you would hope your mom didn't come in while you were trying to connect. Hello, I need my phone. So the world was just a very different place. So it wasn't like I could just Google this stuff and figure it out. But I knew all about like chat lines, because that's what people were doing in school. They were like, oh, I'm on the chat line or whatever. And so I was like, okay, like, let me get in the chat line and like let me see what's happening. And chat lines were much like, if you guys don't know, chat lines were very much giving the comment section in your live. So everybody's conversation is in front of everybody, and it's just moving very, very fast. And if you paid attention enough, you and your person could, some chat lines, you could move into like a private room or something, or a lounge. I forgot what they called it, and you could have a private conversation. And early on, like, there wasn't a thing where you could send pictures. And honestly, most of the cell phones that we had didn't even have a function for us to send pictures. And if it did, it was very pixelated. So if you can remember like Atari or Nintendo, like what those graphics look like, Super Mario, like that is what the graphics pretty much came out like. So you really couldn't tell. Like, you could get a sense of, but it was very pixelated, and it wasn't very like, the graphics just weren't great. And so you think about like the phone situation, you think about like the chat rooms and stuff. And so that was really our way of getting, is it for me in the gay space, it was my way of trying to get to know people who I could go meet later on. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, like I have some conversations. I feel comfortable. We exchange numbers. That's a process. And then, you're falling in love with someone's conversation and somebody's voice mostly because, again, there's no FaceTime for you to get on that. You can't FaceTime. And I think webcams were probably very, very, very new, very, very far and few at the time. And again, a computer was expensive by itself. So most of the time, if you had a computer, especially if you grew up in the hood or you grew up, in the inner city or whatever, like I did, you don't you got the basic model, okay? And you lucky to have that. But that was just our method of doing things, and there was no Google or Apple Maps, so we were printing out directions on MapQuest and hoping that we make it right. That was our situation, or that was my situation, should I say. And so like I would be on the phone, I'd be like, okay, I feel comfortable, I'm gonna go meet this guy or whatever. And you were falling in love again, like I said, with their conversation and their voice a lot of the times. And in your head, you was making up like, oh my God, he said he was 6 foot, and he said that he, had brown eyes, and so you were falling in love with like an illustration that was iterated through words. And so that's what happened for me. And I was just like, okay, let me have some conversation. So for me, the beginning of my journey wasn't sexual at all. It was very fact finding. I was trying to figure out like how does this work, and I've not really had I've not had intimate relationships with men. I've had some best friends, but we weren't even like, what does that look like? And so I started navigating that, and it felt, I, I would say it felt jarring. Like, right, it's something that's new, it's something that's different. It felt jarring, but it also felt exciting as well, because I feel like being in a small town anyway, you just want your world to open up, because especially if you feel like you want more. So I just feel like my world was just opening up, and that was exciting in itself or whatever. But it didn't come without headaches, or it didn't come without like anxiety or anything like that, because again, you're trying to figure it out, like all the feelings that you probably have when you're in a regular, like whatever, what people would call it, a ideal or traditional situation. Yeah, traditional situation, you feel the same thing probably times 10 on the other side. And so your hope and prayer is like, if you meet somebody on the chat line, that they are just close enough to who they describe. And so of course some people weren't, they were not. And you just like, okay, like this ain't gonna work for me. I'm gonna move on and things like that. But learning the lingo was something that I had to figure out too, because once I kind of got comfortable in just basic interactions, I was like, now how the hell do I go further than this? Like, I mean, I don't know. You don't know anything about fleeting. You know what I mean? Dushing. Like you don't know, like dushing. You hear about. You probably knew some disease from your mom or somebody for female in your family, but you ain't really know nothing about it. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh, okay, got it. Like this, okay. And I still don't know much, but other than somebody told me something. You don't want to ask too much because you don't want to seem, like you just don't know shit. So like at that point, I'm like, damn. But one of the things that happened was, I met a lot of older men at that time or whatever. Luckily, I met some really decent older men, some college professors, just some that were just like really cultured, really, really great people. So I had a good introduction into meeting men. Most of them were older than me, but I enjoyed it because the wonderment of me always wanted to learn more and know more. So that kind of worked for me. I didn't meet a lot of bums in the beginning. But so I had to learn the lingo, and it's so great. I met this guy that I thought he and I were going to I thought we were going to date at some point. He was handsome enough. His name was Craig. He was handsome enough or whatever. Gorgeous smile, like blah, just gorgeous smile. That's what I remember about him. I mean, he was cute too, and body. He was kind of muscle bound and stuff like that. From what I can remember, he was short though. But I thought that we were like flirting with each other. And then I realized like he had a situation already with a down low man, which is how I learned about down low men, mind you. So growing up, I didn't really hear the term down low. I didn't know. I didn't really hear it. And if I did hear it, it was probably something that I was like, that ain't none of my business or whatever. But I didn't learn about down low until honestly I met Craig, and through he and I talking, I was like, what are you talking about? And so he's explaining it to me. And I think that was some of his comfort in us becoming friends, is because he knew that I was outside of the situation. I don't know him. I don't know. I'm not about to judge you. I'm honestly trying to figure this shit out. And so he's telling me about his guy. He's like, well, he's supposed to leave. And, we keep having this back and forth, and he don't want to be, out with me. And so I was like, oh, that's down low. Got it. But then Craig is also the friend that is explaining to me like top bottom verse, because I didn't know what that was. So interestingly enough, like me and a guy got to that point or whatever, and I kind of was like, I don't know what we doing here. Like in my mind, I was like, so I guess the one with the biggest piece is the one that's gonna be, doing the bending. So I was like, I mean, and I typically win in that arena. So I was like, okay, I win. You know what I mean? Whoop, I ain't got to do no dishing or whatever else is going on or whatever. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. That wasn't really the case or whatever. Like these motherfuckers are like, nah, sight got you. Like, nah, yeah, you gonna bend it over. And I'm like, oh Lord Jesus or whatever. So I just remember going to Craig one day, like, Craig, like, how do you know which one is going to be like the one giving and which one is supposed, like, how do you figure that out? Or is like everybody supposed to do, like, what is it? And he was like, well, you got to figure out if you're a top, bottom, or verse. And I'm like, huh? Like, you know what I mean? And in my mind, like, I can add. So I mean, I'm like, okay, top, obviously I'm getting it. Bottom, okay. And I'm like, but let me check for my own understanding. Like, okay, that makes so much sense. But you don't know the lingo. You just don't know the lingo. You just out there doing shit or practicing. I don't know. So I had to figure that out too. And then later on, I had to figure out the whole mask, fem, discrete thing. And so I'm like, God, there's a whole world of terminology out here that I have no association, no definition, no experience with. And I'm like, dear God, like I already thought the top, bottom, and verse was crazy. And now I'm having to figure out this mass film discrete situation. Now I'm skipping over DL because obviously I had learned enough from Craig about his guy that I was like, okay. And I didn't know how bad DL was until later on, but I knew at that point, like, oh yeah, I don't want to be with nobody that's like, like the stuff that was going on. I was like, I don't want to be with nobody like that. So I learned about what people consider mask and trade, and I'm still, even though I've been in it now for close to 20 years, I'm still a little bit hazy on the difference between mask and trade. I'm still a little hazy on it because I feel like it gets used interchangeably. Although I feel like DL and trade gets used interchangeably too, but trade is like more of a look from what I understand, and DL, it can be the look, but it's also like how they live on the low, down low. So I don't know. I don't even want to get into that. I like to avoid that at the same time or whatever. But if you're not already getting a sense of why I feel uncomfortable in my gayness, it is like when it comes to the lifestyle and the culture of, not being with another man, it's the culture and lifestyle of doing the things. It even now, like I feel some type of way. I'm like, okay, I hope I'm explaining this the right way, which is really why I wanted to tell this story. And it's why I don't talk about a lot of the things, because I'm like, I don't feel like I'm the best spokesperson. And I don't feel like, even now that, it's been almost 20 years in it, I don't feel like I fully understand enough, and I haven't had enough exposure. Not and I'm not trying to get it, to be truthfully honest. Like if I'm being very honest, I'm not trying to get it. If it happens, great. If not, I'm fine with just being me in my house, like I said earlier. But learning the lingo is just definitely something that I had to learn as well. And it was just a lot. And then there's like Butch Queen, there's Femme Queen, there's, you know what I mean? Then, I mean, trans was a little bit in the beginning. I think in the beginning, I understood trans. I understood the concept of being trans, and I had a friend kind of at the early of my, coming into, understanding things. I had a friend who was trans, and she spent time with me, and she had a thing for me for a little bit, but like we had the best times together, and I appreciated everything that we hung out, we did things together. She talked to me about her life and just all kinds of things. So I appreciated her, and it was a wonderful, her name is London. But I appreciated her for being my introduction into the dolls, as they say these days, because in a world where somebody could have told me, well, they couldn't have told me anything, but in a world where someone could have introduced it to me a certain way, I think having her as just my friend and not walking into it with any pretenses really just helped me understand. And I don't think I asked her a lot of questions like about transitioning, because in my mind, I understood the concept of, but I just learned through her sharing. Like she talked to me about surgery. She talked to me about like her. So I guess some questions were just organically answered for me, I guess, at that time or whatever. And maybe like I just was like, people are people, which is how I operate anyway. So I didn't really have like all of that for needing to understand it. I just was like, I'm learning from this person, like how they feel. So I shout out to London for being my first. Because I mean it was wonderful introduction into understanding the experience. And then then you have to learn about drag queens, and I'm like, okay, now this is different. And I remember the first drag queen that I met, her name was Shublee Onassis Dupree. And I tell you, when I first met Shublee, I she was so, first of all, let me say this. Chablis, very vibrant, very, very fun, says some of the craziest stuff, which I was always laughing. But at the beginning of my journey, like you can imagine, I wasn't really, I don't know that I don't want to say I wasn't friendly, but I wasn't really like open socially. I kind of like would be in the room and I would be like kind of just sitting off chilling or whatever. And so if you looked at me back in the day, you'd be like, oh, the trade is just sitting over there in the corner, and I'm telling y'all that because that's what it was or whatever. But I just remember being off in the corner quiet because I'm absorbing being around just like a bunch of different people. So let me back up a little bit because I think I took you too far too fast. Um, when I dated the older men who were more scholarly, who were more established, I just met them by chance on chat lines, and we, took our conversations offline. And then Craig introduced me to somebody that I saw. I think he showed me my first gay app, and there was like guys on this app, and I was like, okay, like what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? And one of the guys that I showed him, he's like, oh, that's my friend. I was like, this is your friend? He's like, yes, that's my friend. I was like, for real? Now the what I thought the guy was going to be when I met him was totally different. I thought the guy was gonna be probably like my height, 6 foot, 6'1", something like that. I thought this was gonna be like a dude that was more complimentary to my size and my stature or whatever. Nah. The picture could be deceiving, and what you make up in your mind could be very deceiving. So when dude came, he ended up being like 5'7", very, very petite, and like very feminine, honestly. And no other way I can say it, but very, very feminine, the way that he used his hands, the way that he did his neck, and then even his voice had a little twang to it. I was like, oh wow, this is very different than I thought it was gonna be. But I remember going on a date with the dude. We went to like, I don't know, it was something like a Waffle House or something. I can't remember. Maybe Steak and Shake. I feel like it was may have been Steak and Shake, maybe Steak and Shake. And I just remember being like, I'm not finna like this dude at all. And it had nothing to do with him being feminine. It just had everything to do with what I thought he was gonna look like and stuff and sound like when he got there isn't exactly what it was. And again, I'm still learning about all of this terminology and stuff like that. I was just like, I'm not gonna like him. However, I ended up really, really liking him, and he just had like the best energy. And I don't know, it just something he did something to me. It just was like, okay, cool, I kind of like you. And so we ended up dating for a while. And so he's into the whole ballroom scene. He's got all the gay friends who are into all the gay things, and so that is how my world really just blew up. Like the lid literally like blew off of it because now, like I said, I've met my first trans friend. I've met the first drag queen that I've ever met. I had to learn what that was. And so back to Chablis, right? I'm in the corner. I'm still dressing like Trade at the time. That's all I knew. And so Chablis would see me and always just like try to make me laugh or do something. And I would just be like, mm. And I never forget, like one day I was just sitting, I was at one of the functions or one of the house parties or whatever. And I was just sitting there or whatever. And she's like, you gonna speak to me, damn it. And she came and sat on me. And when she sat on me, I didn't know that, what drag queens use was like couch cushions. That's what I called it, foam or whatever. But I was like, not couch cushion or whatever. So when she sat down on me, it just like made this noise. And she was like, girl. And I was like, and I just busted out laughing because it was so funny and stuff like that. And she said something about, some clocking my pads or something. I don't remember what she said. And it was just like, she kept hitting it like, poof. And I just remember busting out laughing. And from that day on, I just loved her to pieces. Like it literally was the thing. She just sat on my lap and then that noise, and then she kept popping it, and I just busted out laughing. And ever since then, I was like, okay, this is gonna be a journey for real. But I love her to this day. She actually supported two of my businesses, like selling women's clothes and shoes. So shout out to her. But that was my introduction, and I was just like, okay. And it's just like you don't know until you know. And so I was navigating, meeting all kinds of people. The guy that I was with didn't tell me about voguing, and I didn't know what it was. I honestly didn't know what voguing was. So, I didn't know that he was doing that stuff. And then, like at one of the house parties, he was like, the friends was like, "Come on, show us your catwalk or duck walk or something." I can't remember. And he was like, "No, I'm not gonna do that or whatever." And it's like, "Oh, you're not doing that because M is here." And he was like, "No, that's not why or whatever." But there's this very real femphobia, I guess, in the LGBT community. There's this real thing that I call, well, it's not just me, but it is a femphobia. I'm going to call it that. I don't know if everybody else is, where people just whatever for whatever reason don't like feminine men, and it's just like this big to do in the community. So this mask for mask type of situation, this no fat no femme situation, which I talked about in another episode. If you want to listen to that, go back and find it. But yeah, there's this whole thing surrounding that. And so he thought that I would feel some type of way about him doing that. I ain't know nothing about it, right? Like I know some people lie and act like they don't know I truly didn't know what the hell was going on. I was just here to learn. I was here to live and learn. And so I remember one day he said something to me. He was like, like, babe, like, like, do you care if I Vogue or whatever? And I was like, I don't even know what it is. Like, I would have to look at you and see what it is or whatever. Like, I would have to look at you and see or whatever. And so, you know, um, they put on they drop the beat. What is it called when they do that? I call it house music. It's probably not house music, but they put on the music or whatever, and he gets to like he drops to the floor with his knees. He's doing the stuff with his hands and stuff like that, and he's twisting and moving and stuff like that, and he's dipping, and I'm just looking at him like I know his ankle hurt. Like the first thing I thought was his ankle has to hurt, and then he did something with his neck. I said his neck has to hurt. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I was still watching because I was like, this is crazy. And it just seemed like the movements were so awkward to me. And it seemed like it would hurt. And so I think at first I was just like, what the hell is this? And then as I started watching like other people in the room do different kind of voguing, I saw like death drops. I saw like spin and death drops. It was a catwalk, all kinds of stuff. And I was like, oh, this is really different. This is really different. And so I remember after the fact him being like, "Did it make me feel some type of way?" And I was like, "I mean, that don't hurt. Like, you don't think that that hurts? Like, what is that or whatever?" And so he literally had to explain to me like ballroom voguing. He's like, "You've never been to a ball?" I was like, "I don't know what a ball is." Like when he asked me what about a ball, I'm thinking like Cinderella. You know what I mean? The Stroke of Midnight. You know what I'm saying? Like I really didn't know that there was a whole culture of that, and so he was like explaining to me like he was in a house and he's like we do like these competitions or whatever. Now because the wonderment of my mind is like, oh, this is fascinating. I wasn't turned off. I didn't. There wasn't anything to be turned off by. I just thought that it seemed a little bit harmful. Like, what are your ankles and stuff and your neck? Like, how do you even But there was another part of me that was like, okay, whatever. I likened it to dancing because I danced for a long time growing up. I was one of those kids, I did a little bit of everything just to see if I liked it. I played football for a hot second. I tried basketball, it wasn't my thing. I played baseball for a long time, did gymnastics, did dance troops. Like I did a lot of things. I did science camps and stuff like that, science clubs and stuff like paleontology club. So I did a lot of things because the wonderment in me was like, is this my thing? Is this not my thing? So I just likened it to dancing, and I was like, okay. And I love art in all of its forms. So I was like, okay, like I don't. Why would I feel some type of way? So he's like, oh, da da da. I still don't understand the whole femme and mass thing at this point. Like I understand the words, but I don't understand why it's an issue. Again, to me, people are just people, and I don't look at like I don't look at what am I trying to say? I don't equate somebody's imagery necessarily to what their interactions are or what they should be. Hopefully that's a better way to say it, or hopefully you understand that or whatever. I don't look at somebody and think because they dress in traditional feminine or what would be deemed woman's garments, and even the antithesis, looking at somebody who dressed in Timberland boots, and I don't automatically think like, oh, that's going to be a bottom or this person is going to do that. I honestly just meet people as people and I just see how they treat me. And I'm still that way until this day. So I didn't even know why he thought that I would feel some type of way. But moving on or whatever, he opened me up to like what that was. And still I'm not understanding like house mothers, house fathers. A lot of people have been ostracized and put out by their families. And so ballroom is a way that people create their own chosen families. I'm not understanding none of that at the time. I'm just like, oh yeah, this is like a dance competition type thing and stuff like that. Now, did I want to go? No, because it still felt very awkward to see at first for me. I was like, this is new. But it became very fascinating once I saw different people do it. And I was like, oh, like this person is very fluid. This person has like some people just are so clean with it. And I'm like, precision and technique is what I would think of. And I was like, oh, like this is really an art form. So anyway, learning the lingo then was hard. And even now I still don't know much more now. Like I watched Pose with the rest of the world and I got a deeper understanding of like ballroom and house families and stuff like that. But I kind of just was winging it. Like I was like, hey, I had that experience and I've never been to a ball. I don't know, and maybe I'll go to one at some point. I don't know. The opportunity hasn't presented itself, but I was like, if the opportunity presents itself, I'm gonna go. If not, I'm just gonna continue to do me, and that's just how I've been moving through my gayness and stuff like that. But again, limited exposure leads to a limited perspective, and so that is what happens when you just don't have that representation again, and you just don't have the exposure. I just don't have it. Now the internet makes it easy for me to Google circumstances, and apps like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X or whatever else. I don't know, I'm not on all, but I'm on some of them. Like it makes it easier for it to come up in my timeline in my life at this point. So yeah, I know of a lot of it, but lived experience I don't have in a lot of it. And so thinking about my path and just who I've been and who I am, it still leaves me feeling very uncomfortable when I'm in rooms with people who knew at a very early age. Like when I meet guys who are like, oh, I knew I didn't like girls since I was like 7. I remember telling my mom, or I knew since I was like 10, or I tried my first girl and I was turned off. Like I get those stories a lot and I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, did you always know before you had your daughter? I was like, I had no idea, honestly. And it's like, you didn't know when you was with her mom? And I'm like, no, I had no idea. How didn't you know? People look at me today because I do present very differently today. And people may think that I'm a little bit more feminine now than I was then. And they're like, well, how didn't you know? Again, trying to equate like my level of interaction with one quality that they see about me. Again, people are just people. Just because you see me being very boisterous in a way with my hands, and that's not probably the right way to say it, very very illustrative with my hands and stuff like that, and maybe you see me moving through a room. I've always had like a Naomi Campbell-esque walk. Like that was just, it was just hidden under the baggy clothes, but I can't help that. That just was what it was. I don't even put on no extra. I just let it do what it do because it is what it is. But people automatically see these things and they attribute it to like, oh, you know, I don't know. Like I still don't know. And do I need to know? No, I really don't. Because honestly, again, if I could have it my way, I would live inside my own world, inside my own bubble, and I would never come out. Like, I really would not. Because once my mind gets to going, it's just going. And I just do my best to try to like be in and a part of the situations. But my mind just still goes back to like trying to figure everything out. And it's so different. But it was just it was tough then, and it's even tougher now, because if I feel like there's always something negative being attached to being gay, and so and being femme, because the femphobia is real even within the community, and it just makes it much much harder for me to navigate it at this point, because I'm like, I don't understand why we're having these discussions. I don't understand why this is a thing. You know what I mean? I can listen to people's preferences, and they say, well, I don't like it because of this or that, and I can choose to like it or not like it. And I think that's really all of us, as people, we can do. We listen to people, accept it for what it is. I'm not trying to change nobody's mind. I don't want to be accepted. I don't want to be tolerated. I just don't want to be fucked with. So if whatever you see, experience, hear, associate, whatever you got going on, if you don't like it, I'm good with that. You just stay over there, and then I'm gonna stay over here, and we'll just do it that way. I don't need to know your disdain or dislike. You know what I'm saying? Just keep your distance, and I'm gonna keep mine. That's how I roll. So I just kind of move through life a little bit differently, and I'm like, okay, whatever is whatever. And so in being, I guess, a somewhat public figure that has a platform, or, yeah, has a platform in social media, I get people who are like, well, Michael, why don't you ever talk about balls? No pun intended. Why don't you ever talk about balls? I can't talk to you about balls. I've never been to one. I've never engaged in one. I don't know other than what I see on the internet. The same as you, right? Especially if they're on the outside of it, the same as you. And there are some people who exist outside of it, like discreet, discreet men who are not necessarily on the DL hiding, but they just don't want everybody knowing what they do or whatever. So like I guess when it comes to discreet men, and I really haven't delved into the discreetness very much, and I've only encountered maybe two or three men that were like, I'm more discreet than anything. But here's the thing, like most people think discreet is like the thug type dudes or whatever. It's not always that. To me, the discreet ones typically are like gym heads that just live in stealth mode. Like they gay and they like gay stuff for real, for real. Cause some of them will tell you all kinds of stuff because they do just kind of sit in the back and blend in and whatnot. But it's not just the thug type. It's not just the gym heads either. It also is like there are some men who are um what I would consider metro, and it's like maybe you would know, maybe you wouldn't know based on like appearance and interaction. But they do as well, in my experience. I'm talking about my experience. Like that has been a thing where it's like, yo, I just kind of do my thing. I don't, get out into the mix and stuff like that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. As somebody who I don't consider myself discreet, I just kind of like my space in my bubble, and that's typically how I navigate. So again, I'll just say like it's been a journey to try to figure it out and to be comfortable inside of something that is a very uncomfortable situation on more than one front. And I'll go back to what I was saying is not knowing, not being to a bar. I can't tell you about one. You're asking me about like Splash or these other events, like, oh my God, I know you can't wait. Or people will be like, oh my God, I know you are so excited about Pride. And I'm like, no, I'm not excited about Pride. Like, why do you think that every gay person that you can identify as gay wants to be on a Pride float? Like, I'm happy that everybody is doing their thing. And I think, live and let live. I ain't judging shit. I ain't gonna yuck nobody else's yum. But like, you're coming over here thinking like I just inherently know, and I don't. I have people like, oh my God, your hands, like, oh my God, I bet you can vogue. Because I have nice hands that were given to me through heredity. Like these were literally genetic. My mother gave me these. Well, my father too. They both had pretty fingernails and stuff like that. They just gave them to me. Like that has nothing to do with my ability to vogue. I just thought, no, there's nothing wrong with voguing, but that doesn't mean that. You know what I mean? Oh, you probably can do hair. Huh? Like it's always like these very crazy things, but it's not just on the outside from heterosexual people or anything like that. It's the inside too, like the femphobia and stuff like that. And it's crazy because some of that is used to kind of be a dig. Like, you know what I mean? It's so crazy that they be like, "Oh, I bet you Vogue, don't you?" Or, "Oh, I bet you know what I mean?" Like in the community. And I'm thinking like this is just the craziest thing that I have ever seen in my life. Like, what would it be if I did or didn't? Like, what would that mean? What would that make me? And so would it make me any less of a person? Would that make me any less attractive physically? Like, what is that or whatever? Like, I've had people try to be like, oh, no, you can tell me if you do this or that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know, but it's just a very weird phenomenon that happens in this situation. And so a lot of times I'm just like left confused because I'm like, I don't really know how to exist, you know, in it, number one, but also like in an adjacent space because I just don't I just feel like people live the way they want to live and you meet people, they do what they want to do, and that's just how I live my life. It doesn't I don't define people based on their social circles or their social interactions. I don't do it based on imagery. I don't do it based on an association to somebody else I met that gives me similar vibes. I literally meet people for people. I don't care if you're a drag queen. I don't care if you're trans, non-binary or whatever. Like I don't those are not the things that I'm thinking about when I'm meeting people for the first time. And I'm not necessarily wondering if you're a top bottom verse or DL discreet whatever. Honestly, like I just want to know, like, are you a decent human being? And so that's how I walk into a room. Like, hi, your name is what? Like, hi, I want to meet you. And then all the other stuff that you can attribute to you, I'm just like, okay, great, like wonderful. These are the things that make you you. But I'm in not anyway trying to compare and contrast people because based on this club, this organization. I just don't do that. I just want to know people for people, and the other stuff is just like a subset of it. But I know some of you are probably like, I understand what you're saying to a degree on that. I get it. And I also understand, as far as I'm saying, like being uncomfortable and the definitions and all that. I'm sure you understand that. And I think also like that who I am is just who I am. And I just want to meet people and I want them to be able to meet me the same way. Um, but it makes for a very uncomfortable situation when people are looking at you and saying like you have a platform, you are a person that visually should do this and you are a person that could be here or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but I'm telling you that that's not who I am. And so it makes it very, very uncomfortable to try to be pressured into something that you're not familiar with. And I know that words, period, in life have meaning. Words have meaning and language is very important. So before I jump out of here, jump out the window saying like, yeah, this is what I know about this. And I don't know anything, honestly, because I've not had the experience. Only thing I have is the internet. And maybe I dated somebody who was a part of that subcategory. I'm not going to come out here and speak with some finality, some finite, absolution about something that I really am not as informed about. You know what I mean? It's not my lived experience. I can give you some stuff from the internet. I can definitely report the news if that's what you want me to do. Well, according to, I can definitely give you that, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I know the ins and out of ballroom culture. I'm not going to act like I know the ins and outs of being a trans man or being a trans woman or non-binary. People are like, well, what does the LGBTQIA stand for? I'm like, listen, you got the internet just like I do. Like, you think I just sit here all day and dream about LGBTQIA? And I don't like, ma'am, I wake up, I put my shoes, sir, I wake up, they, them, I wake up and put my shoes on just like everybody else. And honestly, I'm just trying to make my mark in the world with what I have been given by God and the universe and all that other good stuff. I'm just trying to make my mark in the world, using the gifts and the talents that I have to empower, motivate, and inspire everybody else. Anything outside of that, I don't know. You'll have to ask somebody who specializes in that. But I do understand social responsibility. And I do see like when somebody in our community is visible that people either side are like, like, when are you going to speak up? When are you going to say something? And I understand the call to action, but I advocate from my place of understanding and my depth of information. Because again, language is very important, and words have meaning, regardless of how people want to twist them. Words have a defined meaning to them. Okay, and where you place them in situations, where you place them in story, where you place them in logic really does, and context really does matter. And so before I speak out of turn about something that I'm not abreast of, or I don't have the depth or the brevity to converse, I would just step away from it. And if I know somebody, I would rather call somebody in or refer you to somebody that's going to say the right thing before I say from my limited viewpoint that I know for sure. And that's why everything that I do, I always say these are my thoughts, my life, my way. And in my experience, this, the Michael experience, in my experience, this, because I can't give you something, I can't give you something and say it's for everybody. That's just not how it works. And I'm not one of those people that likes to do the group think and bandwagon. And so when it comes to gayness, outside of my relationships, outside of going to clubs every now and again, and I'm not a big club head, I live my life just getting up, going to work, doing what fulfills me and my passions. And it's just, to me, everyday stuff. And there are many people I believe in the gay community that live their lives the same way. They may not ever set foot in a gay event. They may not ever try to understand ballroom or ever watch a gay romance. They just live their lives being same sex attracted or whatever it is for whatever is on the binary, or outside of it, whatever that may look like. There's some people just in this world existing and they have no inclination to figure out the culture, or be a part of it, or apprise themselves of it, and they just want to live. And I think at the core of all of us, regardless if that's the culture or experience we want to be a part of, we all just want to live, and we should be free to do so without conviction and without an overly, demanding assertion that we be, a part of something or know something just because of proximity. I think we all just want to live our lives the way that we see fit and engage in the things that we see are important without people stereotyping, generalizing, and adding these predetermined whatever, into it or whatever. So I felt it important in this self journey to talk about how I've kind of arrived at where I am, and hopefully to shed light on something that I'm sure somebody else experiences. I've not personally met anyone that I know of that has voiced to me that they have a similar path. I've not been able to talk to every letter of the LGBTQIA. Knowingly, I don't know. Maybe I have, I don't know. But I haven't had in-depth conversations with enough to say that I know for 100% like how all of it works. And the other thing is I don't have to. I think that there are people who are going to be great historians when it comes to it. I think that there are some people that are going to take up and hold up the political mantle. I think that there are some people that are going to use their social platforms for activism and activation amongst community and communities. And I think that that is beautiful. I think we all have our torch to carry. We all have, our badge of honor, valor, and intelligence, our superpower that we have to give to the world. I would much rather continue to empower those that are in their spaces to continue to do what they do at whatever level they can. I would much rather do that than for me to try to play and not really fully be immersed in stuff, but want to comment on and things like that just because somebody thinks that I should. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean that you should give it or speak it to everyone, because you never know what your impact is, and you never know who is looking at you and saying, that was the person that said this, and that is what I was saying. Like, there is something for everybody. I'm not saying that there isn't. You can feel, think, express yourself however you want to. I'm not saying that you can't. What I'm saying is I'm not going to participate in that because that's just not who I am. If somebody else wants to do it and that's their cup of tea, great, you do it. I'm just not going to do it. So when years ago I started getting popular on Facebook doing my LGT lives, I kept being asked about trans issues. I kept being asked about lesbian issues. And I was like, guess what? I'm not trans and I'm not lesbian, but how about I find some people, because you are asking, let me find some people who will come on and have the conversation. Shout out to Marissa Miller. Shout out to Victoria Doherty. Um, Shout out to a lot of the dolls, the girls that came and did panels. There were a lot of girls that I can't remember their names at the time, but I had one panel. Some of the girls didn't like the way that went, and then there was like 5 or 6 of us. So shout out to all the dolls. Honestly, just far and wide. Every shout out to the dolls. I love the dolls. But I think the particularly the ones that embraced me and were like, I'm gonna shout out to London again. I appreciate the ones that you know were like, listen here, I'm gonna bring you into my world, and I just wanted to meet them as them. And there are some that will just tell you their whole thing or whatever, and some love to. There's some people who just love to bring you into their world, and I love that. And if not, I'm not gonna push the issue. But lesbians, I was like, I'm not a lesbian. Let me have somebody who is a lesbian that wants to talk about that experience. Come on, you know what I mean? Shout out to like my friend LJ, or my friend LJ. Shout out to what's her name, Kat. Shout out to some of the girls that came through and was like, let me go ahead on and help you in this situation or whatever. Because I don't want to ever lend my voice to something that I can't be proud of and that I don't feel 100% that it is organic and authentic. And I can't do that. I will not have conversations half baked. And so when it comes to, again, being gay, yes, I am same sex attracted. Do I go to gay clubs occasionally? Sure. But that is probably the extent of which I can give you any insider information. I can't tell you if your baby daddy's on the down low. I can't tell you if your uncle is on the down low. I can't tell you by looking at your great nephew or your son or whoever. I can't look at them and tell based on one or two things. I cannot. Like, you have to get to know people for people. There's so many men and women that you could look at and be like, I would have thought. And no, they like it the way the way that it has been traditionally. So I try to stay away from that, because one of the core principles I hold for myself is, if you cannot help a situation, if you cannot find it in yourself to help a situation or can't help whatever, at the very least, don't do anything that will hurt it. And that's just my personal mantra, and kind of like my guiding light when it comes to things. If I don't have the depth to, and I don't have the experience, I just won't talk about it or whatever. I can give you my experience, but that's about it when it comes to that. So I am, I know some people are probably like, well, what are you doing to change that? It's not that I'm necessarily doing anything to change that, but I am using the tools, resources, and, environments around me to inform it as I move forward. And it wasn't because I felt like I needed to, or well, let me go back. I shouldn't say that I didn't need to, in a way or so, or that I was pressured into it. Now it is just as I have opened up and expanded my world, and I'm dating very much so different than I ever have. I'm encountering people and thought processes that I've never encountered before. And so the wonderment in my brain is like, where did that come from? And like, how come I'm just now coming across this at almost 40? And so I find myself immersing myself into different podcasts. Thank God for technology, different podcasts, and like being open to just different cultures who experience the same thing, right? Different nationalities that I just was like, why have I not been over here? And understanding that everybody, not understanding that everybody's different because I know they are, but understanding why everybody's experience is different. And so that is my story, and that is my uncomfortableness, and we'll see what happens over time. But my hope is that you take away from this conversation that people are just people, and we should be getting to know them as such. And just because you see a certain type of imagery or you see a certain type of interaction, you should not equate that to who someone is. Like you can't just take one thing and assume that because it was there or somewhere else that it's the exact same thing. People are just people. So I hope that we all leave understanding that a little bit more, and hopefully you all understand me a little bit more. This has been the Michael Experience Podcast, and as I always say, go out there and love on yourself before you can love on somebody else. Until next time, peace and love, y'all. Bye.